Hey everybody, welcome to episode 14 of The Bitter Pill, the show where we talk about the bitter pills of truth that people are afraid to swallow and that the corporate media doesn't want you to hear about. So today, the topic of discussion is right there on the screen. I'm going to be talking about the need to cancel animal agriculture. Now that seems like a wild and crazy idea. Statistics suggest probably 95% of you eat meat, and most of the rest of you consume some sort of animal product, such as milk or cheese or something like that. Um, but I'm going to talk about why this is something that we ought to consider. Well, I'm sure you can guess where I'm probably going with this. The current situation in the world is as follows. We have a new virus, the coronavirus, that uh, apparently originated from a so-called wet market in Wuhan, China. Wet markets are markets where live animals are kept on display for people to um, choose the animal they want to eat, and then it's killed and packaged up for them right there in the market. So apparently, in some way, um, the initial cases of coronavirus came from the Huanan wet market in Wuhan, China, um, and that's not a new thing. Um, there have been cases where viruses or other pathogens have originated from animals for a very long time. In fact, the worst pandemic in human history, the 1918 through 1920 swine uh, flu pandemic. No, swine flu was later. Anyway, the 1918 through 1920 flu pandemic, which killed tens of millions of people, actually more than World War I believe, originated from birds. And pigs are another common source. But anyway, so just to kind of update you on the situation we're confronting right now, after the initial case uh, occurred in sometime in late December, I believe. We are now up to a total, according to Johns Hopkins Coronavirus Research Center, when I uploaded it a few minutes ago, we have 214,000 confirmed deaths from cases of coronavirus, uh, closing on 9,000 total deaths. Um, and there are assorted other websites you can look at for up-to-date information about coronavirus statistics and information. Here's a very good one that I just found out about yesterday, cov219.live. Um, and one that I've been following for a while is the worldometers.info slash coronavirus site. And they seem to have the most up-to-date information, generally speaking. Um, so, okay, this website uses cookies, blah, blah, blah. I'd like to get rid of that, but let's see if I can. No. Hmm. Oh, okay, got it. Sorry about that. Okay, now this virus is regarded by many as the most deadly uh, threat to public health of any that we've had in 100 years, going all the way back to the um, 2008, excuse me, 1918 to 1920 uh, flu pandemic. Now, the coronavirus is not an influenza virus, although the symptoms are very similar to the flu. It's a upper respiratory virus that causes an upper respiratory infection that um, is from the same family of viruses as the common cold, but it's also from the same family of viruses as SARS and MERS, which were very deadly viruses that also originated from animals back in the early 2000s. Fortunately, those viruses were not as contagious as the COVID-19 virus, the current coronavirus. But they were quite deadly, so it's very fortunate that they were contained. But the reason why COVID-19 is considered such a dire threat is that it is very contagious, not as contagious as the flu or colds, but still very contagious. Sorry. And it's also quite likely to kill you if you fall into certain demographic categories, such as the elderly or people who have some sort of chronic health condition, such as heart disease or diabetes or serious obstructive lung disease, such as emphysema and so forth. So out of the number of cases that are no longer active, so either somebody has gotten over them or they've died, 10% of the time people died. Overall, it's hard to estimate the overall mortality rate because, as you can see, there are more active cases than closed cases. So we won't know the final figure till hopefully this is over with at some point. But it seems to be running around 4%, a little less or a little more, depending on the capacity of countries' health systems to cope with it. But there have been drastically different outcomes in different countries depending on the way that they've approached this virus. So, as you can see, China has got the new cases pretty much under control. Most of those new cases are from people who flew into the country from outside of the country, and they are quarantined when they come in. There was only, I believe, one new case that originated from someone who was already in China within the last few days. In contrast, Italy, as you can see, there have been 4,200 new cases just within the last day, 475 new deaths. So as you might imagine, even though it has a very good healthcare system, one of the best in the world, Italy is currently unable to handle the pace of the epidemic. It's completely overloading their healthcare system. And unfortunately, despite our best efforts, things are going to get worse than this. According to this article, impact of non-pharmaceutical interventions to reduce COVID-19 mortality and healthcare demand. Well, if we did nothing, this would definitely kill millions of people, both because of the significant mortality rates, a couple dozen at least times a higher death rate than most flus, and the fact that it's quite infectious and people don't have resistance to it because it's new, the novel coronavirus. But hopefully we will, countries in the world will ultimately wind up closer to China or various other countries that have started to bring it under control or had it under control from the beginning, such as South Korea or Taiwan or Singapore. But it remains to be seen to what extent and whether countries will be able to bring it under control and whether they act soon enough. But in any case, just what I want to focus on here is the fact that so many infectious diseases in humans originate in animals. So, well, why is that? This has always been a problem, as I already said. The 1918 to 20 uh, influenza pandemic that killed so many people originated with birds, but the dangers have increased because within the last few decades, um, the size of animal farms has rapidly increased. We have a lot more so-called factory farms now where a very large number of animals, thousands and thousands of birds or pigs, which are the most common sources of influenza, um, are crammed together and they're given massive doses of antibiotics because the people who run these farms know that cramming large numbers of animals together is under unsanitary conditions, often keeping the animals in pretty poor health, um, unable to live their natural lives at all. They're going to need to give them antibiotics to keep them from getting bacterial infectious diseases. And in fact, about 80% of the world's antibiotics are given to animals that are raised for human consumption. Um, and this has serious consequences. 23,000 people are dying already each year just in the United States from antibiotic resistant bacteria, which have resulted from this overuse of antibiotics by animal agribusiness. Uh, and novel influenza viruses have, associated with animal agriculture, have been the source of the 1918 H1N1 epidemic that I already mentioned, the 1957 influenza epidemic, the 1968 Hong Kong flu epidemic, and the 2009 H1N1 pandemic. And another source of infection besides farms is animal fairs, such as 4-H fairs and so forth. And of course, we know about the dangers of live animal markets. Now, people focus on the live animal markets that exist in China because they have been the origin of a couple of recent um, coronaviruses. But those kinds of markets exist in many places in the world, including the United States. Uh, this virus could very well have originated here. And overall, about 75% of new emerging diseases originate with animals, most of them under circumstances such as the Huanan seafood market or in industrial agricultural farms. So I just want to kind of sum up here, show a video made by Wayne Sheng, the co-founder of Direct Action Everywhere, a large and growing worldwide animal rights organization that has, through direct action protests and through open rescues of animals in industrial farms, which that's another form of direct action. They have brought attention to this issue among virtually every major media outlet in the world. So DXE, as it's called for short, is leading the way in bringing the public's attention to issues having to do with the exploitation of animals. So I'll let Wayne talk about this here.
The coronavirus is spreading. It's in over 20 countries, and the World Health Organization has declared a global emergency. But there's an underlying virus that's really causing this all to happen. It's called animal exploitation. Health officials said the coronavirus outbreak spread from the Huanan seafood market in Wuhan, China, a city with more people than Chicago and New York combined. Huanan is what's known as a wet market because vendors slaughter animals right there as customers wait. A customer of Huanan Market was the first to die of the virus, and the market has since been closed. New research suggests that the virus originated with bats. It's possible that someone ate contaminated bat meat, but also possible that a bat infected another animal at the market. The market sold wild animals, which is not uncommon in certain parts of China. There's public outcry over the consumption of wild animals, but this coronavirus outbreak is not unique. Human beings have always caught illnesses from our exploitation of animals, whether wild or farmed. The avian flu pandemic started with birds. The 2009 swine flu pandemic came from pigs. We've also discovered that bats were transmitting Ebola. And now, the risk is increasing. Climate change and environmental destruction are changing animals' natural habitats, which drives them to new areas and increases their interactions with human populations, increasing the risk of outbreak. The coronavirus has infected thousands of people already. 4 U.S. states have confirmed cases of coronavirus, including California. The CDC has started screening passengers
now,
at 20 airports, including San Francisco, Los Angeles, and New York. The U.S. State Department is telling people not to travel to China and set the new advisory level at level 4, the highest level. Google, Amazon, and Microsoft have closed down their offices in China, and 2,000 Starbucks stores in China have closed for business. But even with thousands of cases of coronavirus, there are far more cases of salmonella, which is caused by animal feces. More than 1 million yearly cases in the United States alone. As long as people are eating animals and traces of their feces, these outbreaks will continue. We need a system-wide solution, but our government is not treating this virus as a symptom of a much bigger problem. Instead, countries outside of China are turning to xenophobia. Tens of thousands of people have signed petitions asking the government to ban Chinese nationals from entering the country. In South Korea and Vietnam, businesses are posting signs indicating that Chinese nationals are not welcome. A French newspaper's front page warned of a, quote, yellow alert, and the U.S. Secretary of Commerce said he thinks the outbreak will help to accelerate the return of jobs to North America. But what we need isn't division or competition. We need to come together as a global population and address the root cause, animal exploitation. And we need to do it before it's too late.
Okay, so as Wayne mentioned, a lot of the early reaction to coronavirus, and this video was made about a month and a half ago, so obviously it's a bit out of date, and we see that the virus has spread all over the world now, and there are far more current cases in other parts of the world now than there are in China. But in any case, as he pointed out, a lot of the initial reaction to the virus, not just in the United States, but in many parts of the world, was xenophobia, blaming China and Chinese people for this virus. But the problem isn't specifically China or anybody from China. The problem is that these viruses are transmissible from animals to humans, and under certain circumstances, such as crowded animal farms and animals being administered high doses of antibiotics, and other conditions such as county fairs and wet markets, where there's a lot of contact between humans and animals that are often infected due to the conditions in which they were raised. And there's a huge potential for animal to human transmission. And really, if you look across the board at the number of infections resulting from animal to human transmission that were already occurring before we even had coronavirus, or at least if they're recurring things in the human population that originally are traceable to animals, you're talking about tens or hundreds of thousands of deaths in the United States alone each year. And coronavirus is only going to make things much worse. So really, ultimately, the only solution is cancel animal agriculture. Cancel raising animals for human purposes. Cancel the humane lie that is trying to convince people that animals are being raised in humane ways when they're really not. Cancel the prosecution of whistleblowers, uh, people from animal rights activist groups such as Direct Action Everywhere, as well as groups in other parts of the world, such as Australia, have been prosecuted for trying through various means to bring these uh, things involving horrible treatment of animals, animal to human disease transmission, and so forth to the public's attention. Um, they're being prosecuted for telling the truth about what animal agriculture means for animals, for human health, and for the environment. And that's because there's a lot of money involved in animal agribusiness, and animal agriculture has been able to corrupt governments all over the world. Um, cancel the spread of disease and violence, cancel injustice, cancel animal ag. Okay, well, that concludes today's episode of The Bitter Pill. I will leave lots of links in the description of the video. I will see you next time.